Welcome everyone to the next alumni career webinar on the benefits of building a career in tech sales with JR Butler and John Davis from the class of 2008. I'm Maura Sweeney, Director of Alumni Career and Professional Development at Holy Cross, and I'm thrilled to welcome you to this webinar exclusively for the Holy Cross community. We'll be together for about an hour today. After the formal presentation, JR and John will take questions from you for as long as time allows. And I encourage you to submit questions using the Q&A function located on your webinar control panel. This presentation is recorded and will be shared with all participants in a few days. Now it's my pleasure to introduce you to today's speakers. JR Butler has been working in technology sales since graduation from Holy Cross, spending a majority of his career selling to large companies who are attempting to approach digital transformation and innovation, leveraging cutting-edge automation and technology platforms. He was formerly head of sales strategy and execution for Turbonomic, helping grow the company from 200 to 3,000 customers and 30 to 650 employees, and a recent $2 billion acquisition by IBM. He is now the Chief Revenue Officer at an early stage startup based in Arizona named Pillir. John Davis started his career in financial services, but after a few years found himself intrigued by other friends' earnings potentials and experiences. He made the jump to technology sales and soon found himself running all of Canada for a sales business unit of $250 billion Oracle. He went on to author a book on the transition, How to Get a Sales Job, an Amazon bestseller. He is now a sales leader at privately funded startup OneStream, who just raised $200 million on a $6 billion valuation. With that, I'll hand things over to JR and John. I am thrilled to have you here today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us, Maura. I can get started. So from an agenda perspective, in terms of what we want to cover, everybody, thank you for joining us, first of all, or viewing this later. John and I will get a little deeper into our backgrounds and do some introductions. We're going to talk a little bit about what sales is in 2021. I think, you know, me personally, when I graduated from Holy Cross, there were certainly some preconceived notions about what sales was. And I think we all have a certain view in our head of exactly what sales is, but it's changed a lot, especially in the last few years. So we're going to talk a little bit about what that is like. We're going to talk specifically about transitioning for those a little bit later in your career. John is a perfect example of it. We have a few other Holy Cross alumni that we're going to talk about. We're going to be really transparent about both the pros, but also the cons of a career in tech sales. I think it's important you understand exactly what you're getting yourself into. And there are tons and tons of career path options that we'll talk into. And then most importantly, for those that are really serious about this potential transition, we're going to talk a little bit about how to break into this business. You know, we do kind of have an expert. John wrote a book about it. So super excited. John, do you want to start with your background and then I can take over?
Sure. Thanks, JR. Hi, everyone. As Maura said, as JR said, I'm John Davis. I'm coming to you live from Toronto, Canada. I grew up in Massachusetts, went to Holy Cross, graduated in 2008. And I didn't have the privilege of really understanding what a successful career looked like after college. My parents didn't go to college. I didn't have, you know, too much training in this arena. So what I did was I sought out economics and finance. I majored in economics at Holy Cross. I saw a lot of people doing that. And after college, I got a job at a bank. I worked at the Federal Home Loan Bank in downtown Boston during the recession. And I learned a lot. I was doing a lot of numbers, a lot of Excel spreadsheets. I like to think I was pretty successful in that role, but I fell short when it came to earning potential. I felt like I was consistently performing well, but I wasn't making as much money as some of the employees at my bank that had been there for 10, 20, 30 years. So what I did was I inquired about a promotion. I sought out further education. I started going to night school at UMass Boston, and I pursued my MBA in finance and accounting. I looked at the Series 7 exams, the CFA exams, CPA exams. I was trying to get more education under my belt so I could be more valuable to the bank. At the same time, a couple of my friends were in technology sales, JR included, and I saw what they were doing in terms of earning potential. I saw that they were making more money, and they were in control of their money and their earnings, their money. So I pursued that angle, and I learned a lot. You're going to hear a lot about that in this webinar. But it really, for me in the beginning, it's very intimidating, right? Here I am, a Holy Cross graduate. I have the federal bank, Deutsche Bank, it's a Wall Street firm under my belt, pursuing an economics, finance, accounting MBA at UMass, and then I just quit. So that was very intimidating. A lot of people said, well, finance, why don't you stick it out longer? You're going to take a pay cut going into entry-level sales. And that's exactly what happened. And I can honestly say it's about 10 years later, I'm absolutely thrilled that I made that decision. So as we go through the webinar today, if you have specific questions or concerns around where you are in your career, we're happy to answer those. It was a big change for me to just quit after I had already started a lot of my career in finance. And that's what my book's about. You can check it out online as well. I think it's readily available, but we can get into that later. So that's a little bit more about myself. JR, I'll kick it back to you.
Thanks, John. And we'll dig into your transition a little bit more later on. I was in a little different situation than John. I actually got into tech sales right after school. I got really lucky while I was at Holy Cross. It was actually a finance internship at EMC. And my job was walking around all their data centers in Hopkinton in their headquarters and doing asset tagging. It was actually a horrible internship. But because I'm like naturally inquisitive, I would ask a million questions every time I walked around these data centers. And I very specifically one day asked the guy how much one of the storage arrays cost. And, these are these big refrigerator sized, they're basically servers with spinning disks in them that store companies' data. And the guy was like, well, this is like $4 million. And I was like, well, who sells those things? And he kind of looked me up and down, asked where I went to school. And I told him Holy Cross. And he's like, well, guys like you do. And my mother works in real estate. So I understood the idea of commissions versus size of deals. So that's what candidly got me interested in it at first. So when I graduated, I got right into the business. Like John, I'm a first generation college graduate. Looking back at my experience at Holy Cross, I wish somebody had pushed me more towards this business. I got lucky and fell into it. And John and I spent a lot of time with current students about the opportunity in tech sales. From a career path perspective, I started initially as a reseller, which is like a small regional organization that helps EMC, Cisco, HP, the big tech companies put together these solutions for customers because none of these products work by themselves. They really need value-added solution providers like my old company to do it. So that's how I started. And then I got, again, really lucky and ended up at a very small, like 15-person startup in Boston. I was the third or fourth sales guy they hired. And we grew the company from 15 people to 800 people, from 2 million in revenue to 200 million in revenue. And the company sold to IBM for $2 billion earlier this year. And I got tapped on the shoulder by an investor in Boston to go take over go-to-market for another startup and try to do the same thing again. I'm super passionate about the career of technology sales, about what it's afforded me in my life for both experiences and a financial perspective. So I spend a lot of time mentoring people that are making late career transitions. I started a company around it that I'll talk a little bit about at the end. And I do a lot of mentorship. So even if you're just kind of curious about this as a career and you want to have a further conversation, both John and I are very much open to that. So getting into like, what is sales nowadays, right? I know, when most people think of sales, they think of the greasy haired used auto salesperson trying to get them in a lemon. The reality is the business has changed a lot, especially when it comes to like large ticket tech items that John and I sell. The new sales motion is much more of a consulting based approach where you're not really going in trying to sell a customer, an idea, or you're really trying to understand what they're trying to solve, what problems they're trying to solve. You have to be a subject matter expert on what your technology does, but it's really more about trying to help them identify problems that they have, and then showing them that your solution solves those problems. I can speak, and John, I know you've had this experience as well, where, I've sold multi-million-dollar softwares to companies, and, today the way that companies make decisions, it's not like the old days where there's like some executive in a boardroom of mahogany somewhere making a decision. It really takes creating a lot of consensus across an organization. So when you're doing, 8-figure deals at companies like Bank of America or Merrill Lynch or, JP Morgan, you're out there, you're really selling to like upwards of 75 to 80 people. You're creating consensus across multiple departments, and you're really challenging the status quo. So, the old saying of a customer is always right definitely no longer applies. I think the best salespeople I work with today are people that can tell somebody that they're wrong and say it passionately and from a perspective of knowing that their convictions are correct, and not focusing on the technology itself, but really the business value that it drives. And then being really good at positioning the commercial side of it, right? You're going to give us $1 million and we're going to give you back $3 million, right? And really identifying the return on investment, the total cost of ownership, and where there's business value in the technology. So it's not like, hey, here's my Gidget and here's the 50 reasons why it's amazing and do you want to buy it? It's more questions and understanding, what customers are looking for. John, I want to let you kind of comment on this a little bit.
Yeah, and JR, you're exactly right. The new sales motion on the right side of the screen here, these bullet points are designed specifically for people like you, people with a liberal arts degree, well-rounded, social, smart, personable. This is not, you don't have to be a data scientist to sell software at this point. You just have to be aware of the business, the commercial side of it, problem side of it, and really consult customers on, okay, this is what I see, this is what I'm hearing, this is what our solution does. Would you like to learn more? Would you like to see how it benefits your business from a financial perspective? So companies, tech companies out there, the Apples, the Googles, the Microsofts, they're looking for people like you. They're not looking for the person who understands what a star schema database is. I really don't understand what that is, and I sell software. So they're looking for somebody who can come in and really be well-rounded. I think that's the best way to summarize those bullet points. If you're well-rounded and you can talk to people, you can really, really do well in this career. I think down the other side of the slide here, listen to their needs, don't be pushy, provide relevant information, respond in a timely manner. I mean, if you could get accepted into Holy Cross, I think you can do all of this really well. I think they seem like intangibles that are easy to do, but a lot of people out there struggle with the simple, I guess, business acumen and business etiquette that a top-notch salesperson needs.
Absolutely. And I think the reality is most people that are in tech sales or in sales in general, didn't plan a career in sales. They kind of fell into it like I did. I think it's only 39% of people agree that they intended to go into sales as a career choice. So it is something that, people kind of end up in, but it is something that has a lot of high value. John and I were looking at stats last week, and I read this crazy stat. In 2020, during the pandemic, private equity and venture capital firms invested $428 million a day in software-based startups. I think the reality is nowadays you can't have a startup that isn't somewhat software based. So that's probably a little misleading, but the reality is software is absolutely disrupting every market. And we'll talk a little bit about that as well. The thing that I love about sales, the thing that you should love, especially if you're a little bit older and thinking about making the transition, is that tenure, like John said, is not a defining tenet for getting promoted, right? Nobody cares about, Mary, who's been in the job for 15 years, and that's why she makes more money than you. It's really more about your performance. So the thing that, some of the people that I work with today, I've helped a bunch of guys in their mid to late 30s transition out of things like anything from coaching football to, running investment banking firms, et cetera, that have made the switch, but they've moved into leadership roles within 6 to 18 months because of that nature of sales. And for those folks that have life experience, that have work experience, that is something that is a huge differentiator in this job market right now. So, if you're already working in things like insurance or biotech or HR or some medical field, that's something that you can actually leverage to make yourself a better candidate. And it's an opportunity where you can join at a higher base salary because you have that life experience. And we have a few examples here that we can talk about. So I'll talk about Matt Fanning and Jim Flavin real quick, who these are both former Holy Cross alumni, both guys that in their 30s decided they wanted to change careers. Matt graduated the year before John and I got to Holy Cross. And when he graduated, he got right into coaching football. So Matt I think he was the wide receivers coach under Coach Gilmore. He was there for about 6 years. He was doing a lot of recruiting, living on the road. He just had his first child when he reached out to me and basically was like, listen, JR, like I love football, but I'm starting a family. I need to make more money. I need to have a better work-life balance. And, I know he said, if you can do it, I think I can, which, a lot of conversations start like that with me and John. But Matt's a great example where he transitioned quickly into a pre-IPO company called Mimecast based in Boston. He started as a business development rep and he actually just got promoted. I just ran into him a couple of weeks ago. He just got promoted. He's running the inside sales organization at Mimecast, just about 18 months into his career. Super happy, super excited, and really just a great example. He was 34, I think, when he made the switch. So it's never too late to make the switch and get very quickly into a leadership position. Jim is a recent person that reached out to John and I last summer. Jim spent a long time working in the baseball ranks. He was running basically I think he was an assistant general manager for a team out in Tacoma, right, John, and running ticket sales. And obviously the pandemic did quite a number on all kind of minor league sports. So Jim was looking to move back home, looking to make a career switch again in his mid 30s. And found an awesome company right where he lives up in New Hampshire. And he started in an entry-level role. He's very quickly moved up the ranks there and now, has much better work-life balance. He's making great money and he's super happy about the switch to the point where he's working with John and I very closely with current students, trying to make sure that they are aware of this opportunity in the career that Jim wasn't when we graduated. So those are two great examples of transitions. John, do you want to talk a little bit about Boomer and yourself?
Sure. So Brendan Occasion is a close friend of mine from Holy Cross. He was working in Boston at Brown Brothers for, I think, maybe 13 years and was a vice president leading the compliance division over there. And it's funny because when we were going through college together, I always thought that he was a salesperson. He knew everyone. He was very social, played baseball, captain of the baseball team there. And after college, he went into professional baseball. So he was traveling around the US with some minor league organizations. I think he signed with the Phillies at one point and then found his way into Brown Brothers after he stopped playing baseball. So about a year and a half ago, I published my book, How to Get a Sales Job. And, he reached out and said, hey, I got your book. I took a look at it. And I don't want to say that that was the reason that influenced him, but he started to consider it more when he read some of the, items that I had in the book around quality of life. So for him, he has 3 kids. He lives in Lowell, Massachusetts, and he was going down into Boston on the train every day, 9 to 5, commuting back out of the city up to Lowell, and wanted to spend more time with his family, but also have a career that he could grow with down the road. So he started taking it a little bit more seriously in 2021, and he just signed on for an artificial intelligence sales role based out of Providence. But he doesn't have to go down to Providence, because in sales, you can work more remote and cover a larger territory, and you can set up your meetings on your own time and schedule your own agendas and your own commutes. So that aspect for Brendan was really, I think, the compelling event that made him transition into sales. And he's doing well today. And I think, for people like Jim, Matt, Brendan, myself, like, they're going to do well in this field. And it's just it's a good sign that it's never too late to really make that jump. For myself, I'm down the bottom left here. Same as JR said, like, when I came over, I was about 26. And I think the 5 years I had in investment banking and, cash management, security analysis with the banks, that really helps me a lot more in my discussions with software companies now. Like, when I go in to talk to a company about how much money they have and where they're spending money and how I can help them with this software, this technology, having understood it from their perspective at some point in my career is extremely valuable. I'm sure the same goes for Brendan, same goes for Matt, same goes for Jim, and same goes for you. If you have experience, real world experience in another industry, another sector, or maybe even something entirely different, when you bring that over, you're really gonna utilize it a lot more in sales than you think. So I think that's a key message that JR got across.
Yeah, and John and I obviously are big believers in this as a career. I think, the data points itself to it as well. If you look at some of the numbers, right, this is one of the most high demand jobs today, with all the investments going into the space. As much or as important as the programmers and developers that build software are for these companies, the people who sell them to other organizations are just as important, if not more important, when it comes to valuations and actually being able to grow a business. The pay is awesome, right? You're going to always start out, depending on, your life experience, making, a decent amount of money, but within 12 months, you'll never make less than 6 figures. And the floor continues to go up every year after that. Obviously, software is going to continue to grow, so it's awesome job security. And like we said, and we'll dig into this a little bit more, there's software in every industry that is disrupting every industry. So if you have an interest, I had a call today with somebody who's really interested in aviation, and we work with a couple aviation startups that are in the software space. So it could be as specific as that, or as broad as enterprise IT. And there's softwares in every group, and there's people that are making these transitions. I work really closely with former athletes today that are in their 30s that have spent the last 10 to 15 years getting paid to play a sport that are making the switch. So you can imagine, and these companies love these people because of their maturity, because of their experience, because of their personalities, and they're going to love for the same reasons folks that have worked in other careers. What is technology sales? To break it down very simply, you're trying to find people who have a specific problem that your solution solves, and then showing them that solution can meet their needs. It's really that simple. Obviously, as you get into the details, right, there's different groups and different organizations that have different problems, and that's kind of based off what your company does, what problem you solve, who your buyer is. for your specific technology. Who creates the budget is going to determine exactly what the specifics are. But there's basically three areas in the space. There's hardware, software, and services. And some companies have all three, right? Like big companies like Oracle, Dell, HP, Cisco, et cetera. And then there's a lot of startups that focus in specific areas. John and I are definitely specialized today in software and services, but I've sold all three buckets, and all three are very lucrative, and they're vast in terms of where they can fit into. John, I'm going to go into the job market. Anything you want to hit on in terms of like what the job actually is?
Yeah. And just real quick, I think it's important for everybody or anybody watching this webinar. The technology and software space is changing incredibly, right? The company I work at, the company JR worked at today, they weren't really around before a few years ago, right? Like when I started at Oracle, I was selling one type of product. The next year, they came out with this new product in the cloud, and no one had experience with it. So that just instantly made me at the same level as the person who had been in the industry for 20 years selling software. Because it was this new innovative product, we all had to learn it together. So this is why companies are looking for Holy Cross graduates with liberal arts degrees who are well-rounded, because if you're in tech sales and you're in software sales and you think that you know it all, you're wrong. It's going to change next year. It's going to change the year after. I mean, there's stuff with machine learning and AI that we haven't even touched on yet. So it's going to just keep evolving. So you really need to become a student of technology and software when you get into it. And I think with this type of education that Holy Cross provides, it makes us perfect prime candidates to be in this type of business. You're not going to know everything, but if you can keep up with the changes as they come, you can be very successful.
Perfect. Now, so one of the things that's really, I'm just going to build this out. This is really good time in the market, right? I've spent a lot of my time talking to, chief people persons and heads of recruiting at software companies. And every single one of them comments that this is the hottest job market in this space in the last 30 years. There's massive demand for great salespeople right now. And that's why a lot of these companies are very open to diverse backgrounds, people that haven't done it before, that they think could be successful in it. Almost 1 in every 8 jobs is a full-time sales job right now. John and I can both attest to the fact that this career, from a earning potential perspective, is probably one of the only ones left where you can W-2 7 figures. Other than basically playing professional sports or starting your own company, this is an area where you can literally make $1 million a year fairly consistently if you're at the right company in the right type of position. And I think one of the things that this business offers uniquely, especially in a post-COVID world, is you can live anywhere. I personally, I spend my summers in Brookline, Massachusetts, and I spend my winters in Scottsdale, Arizona. I definitely could not do that if I was, working at a bank or working somewhere else. So it's something that you can do from anywhere. You can travel the world. You get to travel the world for work. At my last company, for 7 years, I was in a Marriott over 100 nights a year for seven years in a row. I've been to, every city, every major city in the US, every NFL city, I call it, multiple times. I've gotten to go to South Korea, Sweden, Amsterdam, kind of everywhere in the world because of this career, and gotten to see a lot of cool things. And I've gotten to meet a lot of cool people and learn about a lot of really cool industries and companies. So, the quality of life is amazing, and the opportunity to earn is huge. And there's no better time ever than right now to get into this job market. John, do you want to add anything there?
That's perfect, JR. And just the middle and the last column, the earning potential and the quality of life, it's exciting. Like, I talk to a ton of people who are trying to transition into sales, and they're kind of bored in their career, or they've hit a plateau in earnings. And when you wake up every day and you think, okay, I can make more money today if I do X, Y, and Z, and I build out my territory more or deliver more proposals, I can make more money. There's really nothing holding me back. That's exciting. That gets me out of bed in the morning. I had a leadership role where I was a manager at Oracle a few years ago. And I quit that role to become a salesperson again at my new company. So I got into management. It was great, had a lot of success, but being a sales professional, I could really jump back into controlling my earnings and having a strong quality of life. So I just want to harp on that a little bit. But other than that, JR, we can move to the next slide.
Yeah, and John, you've kind of emphasized this a bunch of times, and I think it's really important that everybody understands, like, these companies are looking for the skills that you've already shown you have by getting through a Holy Cross, education, right? Like, sales is about communication. It's about thinking critically, being able to analyze things, working on a team, but focusing on individual performance, trying to solve problems constantly. And, John hit the nail on the head. This is a career and a business and an industry that literally changes by the day. There's a law in technology called Moore's Law, where chips get twice as fast and half the size every year. And that applies to every part of the organization, or every part of the industry where things change like that. So the fact that you're a lifelong learner, that you're naturally kind of intellectually curious, is huge. And then, the reality is the world is changing so quickly. You're selling to all different types of people. So being able to have that intercultural effectiveness across, Asian Pacific organizations and Eastern European is really, really critical. And just generally being a leader, right? That thought that, the customer isn't always right. You have to be strong in your convictions, and a true leader to be able to stand in front of a chief information officer and tell them they're wrong. And you have those skills already coming out of Holy Cross. And just general behaviors, which, both John and I have said multiple times now: being social, working hard, being resilient, right? The reality is I've been told a lot more no's than I have yeses, and I've always come back. And being able to do that is really important. Being curious, being empathetic to how other people are feeling, how they think, what motivates them. One of the things that's made Jim, Matt, and Brendan really successful already in sales is they came in very humble and realizing that because of the success they've had in their other careers doesn't mean that they're going to be successful right away. So they come in with this coachable mindset. And I think specifically for folks that are transitioning later on in their career, you've already shown a level of leadership and maturity to do that. And you've got industry and work experience. Those are things that these hiring people are looking for when they're going out and hiring new candidates. John, anything you want to add?
No, I think we should get into, we're making it sound very, very awesome right now, but some of the cons and challenges of sales.
Yeah, the cons are critical, right? I think, it isn't all rainbows and butterflies. The reality is if you decide to get into sales, at least 50% of your compensation is going to be based off what your performance, what you're able to accomplish. If you don't get energy from spending time with new people and meeting new people, if you're naturally introverted person, it's a challenge. It's not impossible. I can tell you, I've some of the best salespeople I've worked for, they'll spend the day at a conference and then they don't want to leave their room after because they're just tired, because it's not a natural stroke for them. So it's not an inhibitor, but it does make it a little challenging. If you're very stable and you like to stay in your comfort zone, that's not an easy job, right? Every day you got to wake up with a pit in your stomach. You have to be okay with that pit every single day. There's a lot of pressure to perform, especially depending on what company you end up at, where, most of the time, even as a 26-year-old at my last company, there was a high expectation on me as a leader to perform because there's investors, there's executives that are waiting on my region's number to come in so that they can continue to grow. You do have to realize the complexity of both sides. You have to learn a new product and you have to learn industries. You have to understand how banks work, how healthcare firms work, how law firms work if you're going to sell to them. That's one of the things I love about it is it's not just one-sided where I'm just an expert in my product. I'm an expert in a lot of industries. I can be dangerous in any conversation. And again, just to reiterate, 50% of that comp is on you, right, John?
Yeah, that's a big thing. Like I said, you can wake up and go search for money, but sometimes it's not there and your manager doesn't care. They want to know where it's coming from and how you're going to get it. Or, you know, there's the horror stories out there of you have a customer that says, hey, JR, I'm going to buy this. We have $1 million. I'm going to get it to you. I'm going to sign the contract tomorrow. And then they just go dark. And, you know, the holidays come or someone gets sick or, you know, someone quits or the company gets acquired. And there's a million different things that have happened to me, to JR, to all kinds of salespeople. So it can be challenging. You know, you're on the hook for the money. I will just make one caveat. Companies aren't really going to fire you anymore the first day if you don't make a sale the first day at, you know, Apple or something. But they're going to invest in you and they're going to try to make you successful. It's a little bit more welcoming than some of the traditional sales roles you might have had in the past or heard about in the past, where if you didn't make enough phone calls, you were let go. But it's pressure, but it's not dangerous to your career.
100%, 100%. And my old CEO at my last company always used to say to us, pressure is a privilege. So I kind of take that to heart. I think we've kind of beat to death the pros, but you know, the reality is this is one of the highest compensated careers you can have. There's products in every space. You get to meet new people. You can build up your career to have a really good work-life balance. It gives you a ton of life skills too. I use what I learn in sales all the time now. And you get to be dangerous in any industry. Here's a couple examples that I looked up last night when I was building this, you know, because we talk to people that come from all types of industries, whether it's coaching football or running minor league baseball organizations or running operations at large banks like Brendan Occasion was. Software is eating the world. And this is just two industries and a list of startups in those two industries. On the left is logistics, and these are just the AI startups in logistics. And on the right is construction. So these are two industries that have been around for literally hundreds of years. They're multi-trillion-dollar industries, and there is a massive amount of venture-backed software companies that are growing, that are looking for salespeople to hire in these spaces. So for folks that came from construction or logistics or insurance or healthcare or banking, you know, the list goes on, and the pictures are all like this, where there's thousands of these companies in these spaces ripe for disruption and ripe for change because of software and technology and modernization. Right, John?
That's right. And the one thing that I'll mention is these companies are sometimes small and, you know, very, I don't know what the non-traditional in the way they think. So, you know, they're willing to take a flyer on people from other industries or, you know, people that haven't done sales before. And I like to point out that when Instagram sold, I think it was for $1 billion, there were 14 people that worked there. That's what is happening in some of these software companies. Yeah, I mean, that would be awesome to be a salesperson at Instagram in the early days, but you could get into, you know, I'm looking on the screen here, Alloy over here, and they have 30 people and they get acquired by Microsoft or like in JR's case, IBM for $2 billion. Like that type of acquisition happens in this space, and it's really helpful and really life-changing from a financial perspective.
100%. And again, just to reiterate, guys, like this is, there's companies, and especially nowadays post-COVID, right? There's more venture money going outside of Boston, New York City, and in the Valley than there ever has been. So you can really work anywhere you want. You can do it in any industry. If you're more comfortable in like more kind of structured areas, you can work at big companies, a lot of publicly traded companies that are growing 100% year over year nowadays. And there's also a lot of startups out there, like John mentioned, where you can jump right in. John, I don't know if you want to add anything here. I feel like we've really
we've covered this. Just think about what you like too. Like software is a big seller because it's expensive, but I talked to a gentleman recently in Buffalo who I met, and he was selling Tomahawk missiles, and he graduated from West Point. So like, I mean, if you're into missiles and that's your thing, great. But if you want to go sell subscriptions or real estate, like that's an option too. And JR, I know his company helps with all different industries when it comes to sales.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of just talking a little bit. So like what are you actually doing in tech sales? I think is important to give you a sense of like what your day-to-day can look like. Typically when you go into an organization, say they're a procurement software platform, they have a sense for the most part of where their product fits the market and who they specifically, what type of organizations their product's going to be a good fit for. And based off this kind of information and data, you're going to get a list of accounts based off whether it's your region, your territory, your segment of the market. And then your goal is to try to identify the right people in those organizations that have the problem that you uniquely solve. From there, your goal is to go in, set an introduction meeting. And when you first start out in your career, you're going to start out as what they call either a business development rep or a sales development rep or an account development rep. But essentially your job is to go in and qualify and close for a first introductory meeting. From there, an account executive, and this is kind of where you'll go in your career, will do a first call and basically do some exploration, try to understand, from the customer, how do they think about the problem that you solve? Do they have the problem that you solve? I think going back to that picture of the guy with the greasy kind of used salesperson, instead of going in and really pitching people, nowadays you're really going in and you're asking them questions that you kind of already know the answer to, but you really need to hear it in their words. That's really what exploration is about, is, asking them very specific questions that will actually have the customer realize that they have this problem. The best companies to work for are the companies that solve a problem that companies don't even know they have. We used to have this kind of telling question at my old company where, we solved application performance, and there's exactly 0 IT departments in the world that admit that their applications have performance problems because that's their job. So we would go in and we would ask this question every time: what do you guys do when you have a performance challenge or somebody complains about performance? And they would give us this long answer. But the reason we asked that question is because if we asked, do you have performance problems, everybody would say no. So kind of coming up with creative ways to pull problems out of them and then trying to create consensus across the organization of that problem, and then getting them to agree to your unique kind of capabilities are the only way to solve that problem, and then trying to finalize a deal and make them understand what the business value is going to be. So this is, this process will determine how you spend your day-to-day, your week-to-week, your quarter-to-quarter. And basically you're going to have metrics that you're held accountable to, and then you can work backwards from those metrics to figure out what your activities are in a given week, a given quarter, or a given year. John, anything you want to add about the general kind of qualify, pitch, and close sales process that we go through every day?
That's perfect. That's spot on. I think the only thing that's changed is the connect piece in the middle, first call. Today, it may not be a phone call, right? Like it might be a LinkedIn message, an email, a Facebook. You might send them cookies. Like there's all kinds of creative ways that companies are trying to get that first call today. But traditionally, yeah, picking up the phone is probably your best bet. But other than that, JR, that's spot on.
Absolutely. And we do have a question in the Q&A from Jonathan. We will definitely answer that towards the end there. Now, getting into sales is not very uniquely different than being in sales. And this is kind of, this is directly from John's book about how to get into tech sales. I think the first thing you want to take a step back and think about is, what types of software companies are you interested in? And you go back to that list. What industry, what size organization, what's your geographical requirements? And based off those types of things, you can kind of create a list of companies that you think you'd be interested in working on. And then you really want to go in and you want to prospect. Where, for folks that are later in their career, where do you have connections that already work there? Where do you know recruiters that have relationships? From there, you're going to do a first call, just like in sales. You're going to do an intro view, an introduction. And the whole goal is two ways. Just like when you're selling a technology, you're qualifying them. Are you going to be a good fit for me as a candidate? And they're qualifying you. Are you going to be a good fit for us? And there's really two areas that they care most about, is that they want to hear that you are thinking seriously about a long-term career in tech sales, and that you're very interested in their organization, right? Why tech sales? Why our company? So if you have good answers for those two things, you're very likely going to get to the next step, which will either be, pre-COVID, an in-person interview, post-COVID, probably another Zoom call, but with a higher person in the organization. And you're really getting them to fall in love with the idea of you as a candidate, and you're making sure that you're going to be a great fit for them. So this is kind of a very simplified version of what the process is. John, the next one is kind of leveraging everyone's slide. Do you want to hit anything on this slide?
Sure.
And then
just my 2 cents on breaking in. It took me many, many interviews to break in from finance and accounting. And my first interview, they told me, hey, kid, you'll never sell anything. Like, best of luck. So just don't get discouraged if somebody tells you can't do it. You just have to find the right person to give you the opportunity.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, breaking in. This is a little bit more on just how to get in front of the sales companies. There's a few different ways here. You are the green circle on the right side of the screen here. Now, you could go and talk to your friend. You could say, hey, I know you work at Microsoft in sales. I'd like to chat with you about that. You could talk to other sales reps at Microsoft. You could talk to the executive administrative assistant at Microsoft for the hiring manager. Your goal really, when you're breaking into sales, is to get to that bottom left yellow circle, the hiring manager. So there's a bunch of different ways you can do it. You could just go directly to them and take a shot there. But I think what JR's really formulated in his other company is having this recruiter presence where they can introduce you directly to the hiring manager. So that's another option. There's sales recruiters, and you could work directly with them. So JR, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about the spider web.
Yeah, I think one of the things, there's a lot of stats around how referrals are higher conversion rates than cold reach out. And I think that goes for when you're selling a product or when that product is yourself. So anything you can use to leverage, just think about your own kind of life where, you're looking for, a pool guy or, some sort of service for your own, like a real estate agent. That's a great example, or a mortgage broker. You tend to work with people that your friends and your network have already leveraged. The same thing applies in sales, and the same thing applies for applying to sales jobs. And that's really what this is about, is creating a network and making sure you're essentially surrounding the opportunity to give yourself the best option. This is what a typical kind of career track looks like. I mentioned the entry-level role. There's that BDR, SDR, BDC. Every company has a different name for it, but ultimately what it is really about business development, about generating qualified opportunities for your organization to close. It's the first step. It's kind of like carrying the water bottles, but it's where you learn a lot. It's the hardest job in an organization. It's the most important job in an organization. And the skills you learn in that first 6 to 18 months is massively valuable. I can tell you now, as a full-time chief revenue officer at a venture-backed startup, that I used the skills that I learned as a BDR back in 2008 every single day, literally every single day. And it's something that, you know, most of these fast growth venture-backed companies, the people who become the leadership in the organization as the organization grows are guys that started as BDRs. So it's a really good base to a long career. From there, you can move into account management, customer success. This is where you're, you know, either managing existing accounts that have already bought your software and you're trying to grow, or, you know, you're getting accounts, a set number of accounts that your job it is to sell your software or other parts of your portfolio into the companies. The field rep role is kind of what people think of when they think of tech sales. This is the guy who goes out and meets with customers. I can tell you from experience as a go-to-market leader, that job is changing very quickly. The amount of in-person meetings is going to be reduced significantly forever because of what happened the last year and a half to the world. But there will always be an opportunity to get on a plane and go meet with customers. From there, you get into leadership, and that's where you're running multiple sales people, or you're managing multiple managers. That's, you know, whether it's a regional manager, regional director, or, you know, VPs are managers of managers. And you know, one of the questions in the Q&A, John, that I think it makes sense to answer now is from a gentleman named Jonathan. He talked about, you know, the shortening tenure in SaaS sales, how, you know, people are moving from BDRs to SVPs in as little as 18 months nowadays. And that's not that rare if you get into the right type of technology company at the right stage in their investment cycles. You know, there's a ton of upside going to a venture-backed startup. That's obviously my experience is kind of the ideal outcome that you could potentially drive, which is a multi-billion-dollar exit, where a lot of people become millionaires. But, you know, I always tell people, and you know, that's the reason I took a CRO job, is only 1 in 10 privately venture-backed companies hit the $100 million mark. So it's actually more likely that, you know, you're going to go into a company that's going to either get bought early or potentially fail. But the reality is if you're in a sales role, you're still going to make a good W-2, and the experience of losing is where you're going to learn the most, more so than winning, right? It's like in athletics. You always learn more when you lose than when you win. So as much as it's a risk going down that venture, private equity, private backed company track there's a lot of upside, right? Everybody wants to learn from everybody else. So if you go to a company and it doesn't have what's deemed a successful exit, you're going to find yourself getting more job offers than you would otherwise if you were still at that company, because they know you learned a ton in the experience. So there are peaks and valleys, and there is some volatility if you go the privately backed, venture-backed, fast growth startup route. But there's so much more upside than there is downside, in my opinion, because you're still going to make the same base salary. You still have the potential to make the same on-track earnings, but the experience in itself is huge. John, anything you want to add to the career path and the kind of question on the volatility of the venture-backed startup? I know you went from a large, you know, famous tech company in Oracle to a venture-backed startup, and I think you're having a great experience with it, right?
Right. So it gets, it's very exciting. You know, Oracle's a massive, probably one of the largest software sales companies in the world. And when I went to this other company that I'm at today, I was the second person in Canada to work for them. So it's a little different feel. There is volatility for sure, but it can be very exciting. One thing I'll say is when I joined my first role at Oracle, they said, okay, here's the path. 24 months in this role, 36 months in the next role, 24 months in the third role. And they kind of told me the typical path. But I actually did very well at the bottom level, the entry level. And within 10 months, I was at the next level. Within 24 months, I was at the next level. So I was a regional manager at Oracle within 3 years, which is a lot faster than they told me when I signed up. So if you have the attitude and the tenacity to keep going, that volatility will be very beneficial for you. I think it will be very beneficial for you.
Absolutely. There's another question here from Sarah. She wants to learn a little bit about, transitioning into sales related fields within tech, things like business intelligence and marketing. And what I would say, if you look at this, this track, right, most BI roles or marketing roles are going to require some sort of technical certifications or experience, right? There's very few marketing roles that are entry level. At my old company, we used to brag to BDR candidates because we had 14 different career paths that BDRs had taken. So, people had started as BDRs and gone into things like marketing, business intelligence, finance. The reason that the BDR role is a great starting point is because you learn so much so quick on two sides. You learn so much about your product and your company, but you also, most importantly, learn about how companies view you and what problems companies have and how companies talk about those problems. And those are things that are critical if you're going to do a different role in an organization. If you're going to get into field marketing, if you're going to get into finance or operations, if you're going to get into, HR, it's radically important that you know intimately what your product does and how your customers think about the problem that you solve. So if that is something, if you're coming from some other career and you're interested in getting into marketing or business intelligence, BDR is a great path into that. But you can also go directly into those kind of entry level sides as well. So you have multiple opportunities. The reality is most of these tech companies are growing so quickly that, they'll take a flyer on anybody with great life experience and work experience. Right, John?
That's right. That's right.
So we got a minute left. This is what I want to leave you with. And Maura will include this in her follow-up, but I actually am so passionate about the career of tech sales that I started a company when my last company sold that's focusing on helping people transition into this career. It's called Shift Group. We started mainly with athletes, but we've now helped a bunch of people from all different types of walks of life, military, PhDs, guys like Jim and Matt who are in coaching or in executive management in different careers. We have a mentorship network. So if you're somebody that's doing something like commercial real estate, we have guys that you can talk to that have gone from commercial real estate into tech. We do all the pre-interview training, and we're starting to do some post-hire training as well. So we're continuing to enable you through your career in tech sales, and all of it is done at no cost to you. We are a recruiting agency. So if you work with us and we get you a job, then we make money. But if we work with you and you don't take a job, that's okay too. We also have, I wanted to make sure that everyone understood this. We have huge networks, John and I do. I know a ton of people in med device and financial services and commercial real estate and pharmaceutical sales. So if you join this hoping to learn just about sales in general, and those are industries you're interested in, we're happy to help you there. If you want to get into tech sales, you're talking to the two right guys, and I have a whole organization behind me that can help you make that switch. Maura, I answered the two Q&A questions. Anything you want to add as we wrap up here?
No, I think what's so nice is as I was writing down questions, you would cover them over the course of your presentation, which was really, really fantastic. And I know the one question that had come in from registration about work-life balance, I think you helped to show that really well, just in the flexibility that this position offered. And I think the one question that I could see a lot of people asking, since I work with a lot of people who would be transitioning, is, and maybe you can speak to this, John, you talked about, okay, leaving a certain salary in your role in finance and going down to an entry-level role in sales, and kind of having to be comfortable knowing that you'll eventually get back up to where you were earning and then exceed it. But I'm curious if you have a sense of how long it typically takes people, say if they leave their salary at a certain place, go into a BDR role, how long will it take for them to get back to where they were earning and then exceed again?
I think every situation is different. That's the political answer, but I would say 12 to 24 months is a typical turnaround. In sales, the first 2 or 3 months you're learning, the next 2 or 3 months you're kind of navigating, the next 2 or 3 months maybe you start to close some deals, book some meetings. So I would say 12 to 24 months is a comfortable pace to get back up. And it goes back to what JR said, is the typical package, the compensation package in sales will be 50% of a base salary and 50% commission. So once you get to 100% commission, you should be back up to where you were at.
Yeah, and that 12 to 24 months, Maura, just to give you a sense, you're going to get to $100,000 W-2 within 12 to that 24 months, easy. So it's a pretty, I think it's probably the fastest path to 6 figures in any career that I know of. So, and then the upside is massive. So it can be a quick transition for those that are used to making a certain amount of money and need to get there quickly.
Yeah.
Matt, Jim, Brendan are guys with families that, making that amount of money was important quickly. That's why they kind of came this way.
That's great. That's very helpful. And the other question I'll ask before we close is about training, because I know you talked about training programs and sales roles. Typically, I think people associate training with them. How long is a typical kind of training program within some of these BDR roles before you're really kind of on your own to make it happen?
A few days, honestly, like in terms of from, I think the bigger companies have a little bit longer, more tenured program where you may be in the classroom for two weeks. But most of the faster growth venture-backed startups are, they've got a 2 or 3 day enablement program before you're on the phone. The thing that is unique in tech, I think, is it's continuous though, right? There's continuous enablement, continuous improvement. They're constantly doing certifications and classes. They're all their entire investment into their sales organization is everything to them. So in terms of training and enablement, it's constant and always going on.
That's great.
And one thing I just want to add more at the end here is, personally, JR and I love helping Holy Cross students, Holy Cross alumni. I know that sounds cheesy or whatever, but we're out here in tech sales. We're assisting people. JR has a whole organization focused on helping people transition into sales. And when we see somebody with a Holy Cross resume, it's just, we're really proud of that and we're willing to help. So don't be afraid or don't be shy to reach out to us one-off on LinkedIn or on email, and we'll connect you with some people in our network to help out.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Wonderful. And I see one last question snuck in, if we can answer it quick. At what level does the work flexibility become an option for those?
I was just typing up an answer. Nowadays, the flexibility is really on day one. Most of the jobs that we're placing today are remote gigs because most companies aren't in the office yet. So that flexibilities can happen on day one. When we go back to a post-COVID world, I don't think it'll ever be the same. I don't think you're ever going to find people in bullpens 5 days a week, 7 to 7, like it used to be, like it was at my company at Turbo when we were in the early days. So the flexibility is always going to be there from day one, I think, personally. John, I don't know if you have a different opinion there.
Yeah, that's it. And if it goes back to the way it was, as soon as you prove yourself too, they're going to give you a lot more flexibility. If your job is to make 12 meetings a month and you make 16 every month, they're going to let you work where you're comfortable.
No, it's one of those careers where nobody's like watching the clock when you clock in and clock out. They're looking at your output, not what your input is. So if your output is where it needs to be, I never once gave a sales rep crap about being in the office or not being clocked in at certain times if they were at their numbers. So your performance is a direct correlation to your flexibility.
That's great. No, thank you both so much. This has been so educational. There's so much good information. I think all of us are going to look forward to that recording to be able to process it all again. So
Awesome.
thank you so much for everything that you do for Holy Cross, but also that you do to really, forward the industry, because it's exciting to see where this is going. And I know that you both have really big jobs making that happen. So thank you so much for taking the time. This has been phenomenal. I hope that everyone has a great rest of your day. I'll share some great information about JR's new company, Shift Group, in case you want to get involved. Otherwise, you can find me in the alumni office. Any questions, I'm at M. Sweeney. Have a great afternoon, everyone. John and JR, thanks so much.
Thank you, Maura.
Bye, everyone.